Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see you all here present. I was just saying to my fellow colleagues, it's a thrill to have so many chairs in the room. It's been a while since I've seen so many chairs packed together in the room. So really a very, very warm welcome to all of you here present. And of course, for those of you joining us online from across the world too. Welcome to the 4th edition of Space Resources Week. Welcome to Luxembourg if you've flown in. I know some of you have flown in from around the world, and we do hope you'll get time to enjoy this lovely country as well, and the sunshine that we're currently reveling in at the moment. Now, if you're joining us online, you have all of the options to connect with people as well. Plenty of opportunities to arrange meetings, whether you're in the room or online. Organised by the European Space Resources Innovation Centre, ESRIC, in collaboration with the European Space Agency, the Luxembourg Space Agency, and LIST, the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, this 3-day conference connects thought leaders from all sorts of industries, institutes, and academia to talk through technical, economic, legal, and other developments, challenges, and solutions for in-situ resource utilization. My name's Lisa Burke, and I'm delighted to be your host once more for this event. Now, I've got the job of giving you some housekeeping rules, some very obvious ones. Turn your phones on silent. Posters, wonderful posters and presentations for submission. Just go to the organization desk where you'll be greeted by Juliette, Yael, or Marie-Hélène. And if you didn't yet have the chance to hang your poster, please do so during the break. The Wi-Fi code, it's very simple. It's the box free. The event is being filmed, and over the last few years, we have had many questions about people's wonderful presentations, and all of the presentation slides will be available after the event. In the app, that's where all of your questions for the speakers through the course of this 3-day conference will be posted. All of your questions will be moderated by the organizers of those particular events. And if you've got any issues with the in-event app, again, just talk to us through the break and we'll sort it out for you. There's a poster competition, so again, go on the digital platform and please vote for your favorite poster, and the winner will receive a lovely prize. And just a little note to all of our wonderful speakers, if you would like to use a headset or anything other than the lectern or a handheld mic, particularly with the headset, just go to our wonderful technical team about 15 minutes before your speech and they will set you up. So without further ado, welcome all, and pleased to formally open this event. Welcome to the stage our Minister of the Economy of Luxembourg, Minister Franz Fayot.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with you. Someone was telling me that at the first edition of this Space Resources Week, 4 years ago, there were 100 participants to the event. And today we have more than 1,000 registrations, more than 350 people being present here in Luxembourg, and 800 online from all over the world. I think this alone shows the success and the development this event had over the years, and how much international attention has grown around space resources utilization, and also around this event. Your presence here today in this room and online means a lot to me personally, but also, more importantly, to Luxembourg's space community. It brings together around 100 international speakers who will take stock of the space resources utilization sector development. And while I unfortunately cannot be present here during the full length of the conference, I very much look forward to reading the conclusions of your discussions after the event has completed. This event, and Lisa mentioned it, is also the result of a fruitful cooperation between Luxembourg's Space Agency, the LIST, the European Space Agency, and of course the European Space Resources Innovation Centre. As you all know, international cooperation is key, and that's nowhere more true than in the field of the space sector. They have to happen in a coordinated, constructive way to benefit to everyone in space and on Earth. And I think that is the topic we are discussing this week, which is at the center of this conference, the focus on sustainability. The various seminars of this event will cover, among other things, the latest discoveries and new concrete uses of space resources, but also the international legal framework and funding methods for research and development of new technologies. This year's program of the Space Resources Week places particular emphasis on the topics of sustainability, circular economy, environmental preservation, and waste treatment. Sustainability is key in the space resources sector due to the scarcity of resources in space. But the processes and technology developments for space resources also give extremely interesting elements and use cases for improving life on Earth. Indeed, while space resources offer a means of exploring the Moon and the solar system in a sustainable way, the space resources field can also be and must be a way of stimulating innovation on Earth and finding new ways to address global challenges, being, of course, particularly the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity on Earth. In addition to developing research activities along the space resource value chain, the ESRIC supports commercial initiatives of established players and startups. It furthermore enables technology transfer between space and non-space industries and promotes public-private partnerships and new initiatives in the field of space resources. And let me tell you that I'm particularly thrilled of ESRIC and the development it has seen over the past 2 years since we have created it here in Luxembourg. It has been very successful so far. The team has been growing constantly. It now has a core team of 12 persons. As of today, ESRIC also has important partnerships with industrial partners such as Airbus and Air Liquide. This week is also the occasion to present the first startups that have begun their pre-incubation in the framework of ESRIC's Startup Support Program. And I am also very pleased to welcome and to say that Dr. Kathryn Hadler has been appointed director of the ESRIC. As an internationally recognized and renowned scientist in mineral processing and beneficiation, Kathryn will further advance space resource utilization research and continue positioning Luxembourg as a European hub in the field. ESRIC is a great collaboration between ESA, LSA, and LIST, and again, I'm so very thrilled that it is here in Luxembourg. The close cooperation, knowledge, and innovative approach of these founding members played so far a significant role in the development of the center. The ESRIC benefits from ESA's institutional power and Luxembourg's global position in this field. ESRIC's big value proposition is to connect research, business development, community management, and knowledge management in Europe, and in doing that, it is truly unique. We are confident that it will be able to play an even more important role in the years to come, fostering the development of the sector in Europe and worldwide. As you all know, Luxembourg has been a front-runner in launching the Space Resources LU initiative in 2016. This is now acknowledged as a strategic topic for the future of space exploration, when it was still a little bit frowned upon or smiled at when we started and set out with this in 2015. This move confirmed once again the commitment of all successive Luxembourg governments to do everything possible to expand the space sector and drive it forward. In Luxembourg, space companies with Strong commercial ideas draw on a full range of support, be it financial, be it premises, research resources, and a collaborative international network of contacts and potential partnerships. We want startups, experts, agencies, and investors at international level to join forces in bringing forward the new space industry in general and the space resources utilization sector in particular. The field of space resources is now on the agenda of many national space agencies and developing faster than ever. Developments are fast outside of Europe. ESA has been putting the topic very high on its agenda, but for Europe to stay a trailblazer, and we need to do more, and I can only say that we strongly support Josef Aschbacher's Agenda 2025 and his drive also to boost the private sector in contributing to developing the space ecosystem. To conclude, I wish you all a very inspiring and enriching Space Resources Week. Let me finish by thanking once again the organizers of this event. I wish you all very good discussions and a great time in Luxembourg over the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. And now, as already alluded to, our next speaker, we're very, very grateful to have the presence of Josef Aschbacher, who is the Director General of ESA and has been so for just over 1 year. So please give a warm welcome to him.
So thank you, Minister Franz Fayot. Very warm welcome also from my side, from the side of ESA. I'm very happy to be here. Actually, just a couple of months ago, I was in this room here on another event where Luxembourg is a pioneer on new space activities. And today, again, on this Space Resources Week 2022, Luxembourg again is among the first in the world which is pioneering new activities and new domains, and I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for the invitation to have us here and to be a very strong partner to Luxembourg on these activities. What are we bringing together here is thought leaders on space resources, and as the Minister was already explaining, this is something where Luxembourg has already a couple of years ago decided to invest in this domain. And I really would like to compliment the vision, but also the initiative of Luxembourg, not only having a vision, but also putting the vision into action and putting resources, a government framework behind it to really build up a capacity, which today is among the best in the world, if not the best in the world, in this domain of space resources. And this is really something that qualifies Luxembourg as a space nation. Luxembourg is a small country, but Luxembourg has enormous investment in a number of space activities. All of you, of course, are very familiar with satellite communication. Again, Luxembourg has decided 2 decades ago to invest in this domain and has been very successful in doing so, and today, of course, is reaping the fruits on the benefits of these early investments. Space resources is in a similar stage, just a couple of years later. Again, Luxembourg has decided that this is a future domain where money is to be made, where science is to be gained, and where Luxembourg wants to invest and wants to be among the first. And as you said, some people smiled in the early days when they heard about this, but more and more people realize how serious this is and how much this becomes a future economic activity. Even more to say that space becomes a future economic zone, and therefore space resources is a fundamental part of using this economic zone and really benefiting from it. So again, compliments to Luxembourg for this decision, for this vision, but also for implementing it very consequently over years, and as we see today in this 4th edition of the Space Resources Week, really having success in attracting people all over the world and making this issue a very important one for Luxembourg, but also for space in Europe and for space in the world. So I'm very impressed about these investments. I'm very impressed about Luxembourg as a space nation. And Luxembourg, let me allow me to say a word on Luxembourg as a member state of ESA. Luxembourg is a small country in terms of population, but is a big country in terms of space investments. Luxembourg is the #1 country in Europe in terms of GDP per capita in space. The average GDP per capita in space in Europe is about 20 euros per year per head. In Luxembourg, this number is 118, so much higher than the average in Europe. Of course, you may say it's a smaller country and therefore the numbers are easier to increase, but this is really also exemplary for me as the Director General of the European Space Agency to see such countries like Luxembourg being pioneers, being successful, but also leading on certain domains and being very strong space powers. And Luxembourg is a space power in the context of Europe and worldwide in certain domains. Let me say a word on ESA's role on space resources. We have heard just a minute ago from the Minister that Luxembourg is working on space resources since about 2015. Also in ESA, we have been actively working on this together with Luxembourg, or partially also triggered by Luxembourg and inspired by Luxembourg, also with some other countries on this domain. We have defined a space resources strategy at the end of the last decade, and in 2020 we have signed the agreement with ESRIC to set up ESRIC and to support it from the European Space Agency's point of view. And I'm very glad to have Kathryn Hadler here today, the new director, in the new function of making sure that ESRIC will develop successfully. Also, I can assure you of ESA's strong support in doing so, because this is a priority for us. ESRIC and the activities here are geared to support startups, to support early stage investors, and to make sure that the new space economy is flourishing and is developing. And this is so much in line with what I have put on the table as new Director General a year ago of ESA, called Agenda 2025, where commercialization is a top priority of my agenda. Commercialization, for me, is something where Europe has to catch up. We are doing good. We're having the brains, we're having the talents in terms of people, but what we need is being faster, being more dynamic, and also making sure that we get access to funding. I had recently, a couple of years ago, when I was in the previous function, organized a management trip with my senior management to Silicon Valley, and to really see firsthand how these companies work and what can we learn in Europe from Silicon Valley-driven space companies. And I've seen a lot. I've seen most of these companies you read about in the newspaper, SpaceX, also Google, Planet, Spire, and many, many others who are very successful today. And a couple of years ago, I boiled it down to 3 key ingredients to succeed for those companies. Number 1, talent. You need talented people who are dedicated and ready to transform an idea into action. Number 2, you need access to money. Venture capital funding in Silicon Valley is relatively easy to acquire. More than 60% of the global venture capital funding is in Silicon Valley. Of course, you may say Europe is far away from Silicon Valley, but it's not true, because first of all, European companies also have many investors in Silicon Valley, but also in Europe, we're building up now an ecosystem of funding entities, venture capital companies, other funding entities, which are investing in space. It took a bit of time, but just recently I've signed a number of agreements with venture capital funds where they want to see and invest in this future growth market, because space is a growing market. And number 3 is time. People in Silicon Valley, young entrepreneurs, are very fast. They call it fail fast, fast forward. And this is something where Europe also has to learn. Being faster, being more dynamic, being more risk-taking, and fall on the nose, stand up, and run again. And this is something that is typical for the mindset in the US. And I think really Europe can learn from that, and I can only encourage the many here in the room and the ones watching remotely that these are ingredients where Europe has to be courageous, and just do it. And just move forward and invest and go for it, because this mentality is very much needed. And as we see in other examples in other places in the world, it works pretty well and pretty successfully. And this is really at the core also of my strategy in ESA, that I would like to support the new space economy, the commercialization of space. We have a lot to learn still. If I give you two numbers, it puts the European commercialization effort in context. Globally, today, about 12 billion US dollars are invested in space from private investors. 12 billion globally. In Europe, this number is about 600 million. So you see that dimension, the difference between the globe, or most of it happening in the US, not only, but a lot, and Europe. So there we have to catch up, and this is something I really would like to support also through a number of activities, and Luxembourg for me is a prime example how this works and how this can be very successful. I have another priority which is expressed in Agenda 25 and which is very relevant for the activities of this Space Resources Week 2022 here, which is human and robotic exploration. I have given my director of human and robotic exploration, David Barker, who is with us today, an envelope for the Ministerial conference, which is 50% higher than what he had in 2019, which was already a good increase compared to the past. So I really want to increase human and robotic exploration because I think this is a future economic zone. There's economic growth, economic potential there, and we have to make sure that European companies and European science, but also commercial companies are benefiting from that. So for me, this is a growth domain which I really would like to support strongly from my end. Of course, all depends on decisions of member states, on subscriptions of programs at the Ministerial in November, where we have an ambitious package which we put on the table for ministers of all ESA member states to subscribe. But also on human and robotic exploration, I have got a mandate in February this year, 16th of February 2022, in Toulouse, by the EU and ESA member states who have very clearly expressed their support of accelerators, inspirators, and Agenda 2025. But also they have asked me to put a high-level advisory group together of eminent people across Europe, not from the space domain, from different levels of society, economists, historians, politicians, so people that are not in the space domain, but representing society, and advise me what to do on the member states, what to do on human exploration. And human exploration, of course, is the next big frontier for Europe. Today, as you know, Europe does not have its own spaceship to bring astronauts into space, does not have its own space station, and does not have today access to the moon. You may say this is futuristic. Yes, for me as Director General of ESA, this is something I'm working at, and I have to build up futuristic scenarios. But yes, this will be a future activity where commercial enterprises are investing. Just last week I was in the US, and there are 4 commercial companies building 4 different types of space stations in low Earth orbit. Whether they all succeed, we shall see, but certainly they are very serious of what they do. As you know, by the end of this decade, or maybe earlier, the space station will run out of orbit and will be dissolved, meaning that there is a future to be built up from a commercial angle, and there will be commercial space stations up there which can be used. The question is, what is Europe doing? Are we renting a room in one of these stations? Are we participating more actively, providing hardware? All these questions need to be addressed. Of course, also going to space is an important element for Europe. Today, we are very happy and very lucky to work with NASA extremely well. And with NASA, we have a very strong partnership that NASA brings our astronauts into space. Just last Wednesday, we launched Samantha Cristoforetti. She met her colleague, Matthias Maurer, in the space station. We have at the moment 2 astronauts of ESA in space. Matthias coming down in a couple of days. And that's quite unique. We have a strong presence in space thanks to our partners in the US. And I want to keep working with the US, but also I would like to be a stronger partner in this partnership, and see and ask the member states, do you want to invest in the medium to long term in your own spaceship or not? And sometimes I make a comparison to say, the next frontier, the next continent is space for us here down on Earth. Just as the previous continent discovered was America a couple of 100 years ago. And the equivalent would be that we would decide today, as a nation or as countries, that we are not building a ship to discover the next continent. Of course, you all know discovery of America by European explorers has brought a very strong position for Europe for centuries to come. And I think that Europe should also invest in the next continent, the next frontier, which is the moon and which is space in general. And there will be lots of opportunities coming up from space activities, not today, not tomorrow, but maybe the day after tomorrow. It will take a couple of years to build it up that this will happen. And there my member states have asked me to come back with this, with the help of this advisory group, at a space summit at the end of 2023 with conclusions of this work and put decision elements on the table for decisions to be made by the member states. So you see, exploration is important and has a huge and bright future, and Luxembourg is in the midst of it, and this Space Resources Week 2022 is a very important element to get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Josef, there. And as you mentioned, David Parker, he is our next speaker. David Parker is Director of Human and Robotic Exploration at ESA, and he used to be Chief Executive of the UK Space Agency from 2013 to 2016. So please welcome him to the stage. Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's great to be back here. I was reflecting on the way and the bus from the airport. Thank you very much. Free buses, isn't that amazing? Certainly in my country, it would be extraordinary. I was reflecting that it was 2019, October 2019, where I was speaking in this room at a Space Resources event back then, and two things were in my mind. The first was the upcoming ESA Ministerial of 2019, where, as the Director General has just said, we were hoping to increase the budget for exploration by 1/3, and I was told I was crazy for even proposing such a scale of budget increase. But also, we were deep in the discussions, and my team, give all the credit to, with the Luxembourg Space Agency about creating ESRIC. And so it's really a pleasure to be back here now in 2022, to have a new director, for ESRIC to be a reality, and for the dream that we were talking about back then to become something much more concrete and progress being made. And so, dear Minister, may I say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I do want to congratulate you and Luxembourg on the vision you've shown in identifying space resources as a key opportunity in the development of your space economy. So what I want to do is to provide a bit of a transition between the introduction that you've heard from the Director General and the specifics about ESRIC by talking about your space exploration program today and what we hope it'll be in the future. It's in the context because, again, we are building up to a Council of Ministers at the end of this year, and it's less than 7 months from now. And space resources is embedded, it's a rich vein within the rock that is the exploration program we call Terra Novi now. So I always say the space exploration offers this unique combination of curiosity and opportunity. The curiosity to venture out into the unknown and the opportunity to bring back to Earth discoveries and skills that are only possible by exploring with humans and robots. So we're focusing on exploring and using 3 destinations. That's low Earth orbit, the Moon, and Mars. And they're different, and they all have their place. So talking about the space station, first of all, Samantha Cristoforetti arrived at the space station, and we've now demonstrated that low Earth orbit has proved its value as a place for humans to live and work now for more than 20 years. And right now, ESA astronaut with a German accent, Matthias Maurer, has been joined by Samantha. But this is a place where dozens of astronauts have performed hundreds of experiments on behalf of thousands of scientists across Europe. But next, the moon is in our sights. The moon has immense scientific, practical potential, but it's also the next place where humans will live and work, and where the human economy will expand out to next. But we keep our eyes on the horizon goal of the red planet Mars because, again, it has a great scientific value and is much to reveal as a planet about the potential for past and present life elsewhere in the solar system, in the universe. Mars started as being a place that had all the same raw materials as this planet. This planet is teeming with life. Mars isn't. The question is, what happened? What went wrong? Now, as I always say, exploration without science is just tourism, but exploration is much more than science. It's the ultimate proving ground for advanced technologies, for energy production, robotics, medical research, all sorts of things that are valuable back here on Earth. I could describe dozens of examples of how things we've done on the space station up there have come back down here on Earth to help us. Medicine and disaster relief, more generally sustainable development. I was talking to someone earlier about the circular economy and how the living in a closed environment such as a space station and in the future the moon is developing the kind of skills and technologies we need for the circular economy. But even brewing beer has been made more efficient and more sustainable by some technologies developed towards space exploration. But the International Space Station has prepared us to go further, to the moon. Again, I always say, the Earth's 8th continent, a museum of 4.5 billion years of solar system history, and a place that has recorded this history more completely and more clearly, perhaps, than anywhere else in the solar system, any other planetary body we have access to, and it's only a few days away. So, for example, did the comets or meteorites that bombarded the early Earth, did they contain the building blocks of life? Can we find them on the moon? As today we have Antarctic research bases, it's my vision, ESA's vision, that in the future we will have a sustainable international research laboratory somewhere in the south polar regions of the moon, tackling really big questions, monitoring our own star, the sun, and understanding its history imprinted perhaps on the moon, looking back to the dawn of the universe with radio telescopes, and yes, learning how to use the resources of the moon to make space exploration more sustainable and creating commercial opportunities along the way. Now, since 2016, we are delivering all of this vision for these 3 destinations in a single coherent plan based on 4 cornerstone exploration campaigns. I did have some slides, but maybe they're not going to be presented. I'm happy to talk without them. But it's based on humans working in low Earth orbit, a partnership of robots and humans going forward to the moon, and Mars exploration today, or it's all about robots, including the first round trip to the red planet Mars sample return. But all of this lays the ground for the horizon goal of one day having Europeans even on the surface of Mars. But what are we talking about now? We're talking 7 months away from an ESA Ministerial, proposing to start a new program within the lunar exploration thread of our program. That's a European Large Logistic Lander. We call it EL3. Maybe we'll name it Argonaut. There were many Argonauts, and this is the point. We want to have a series of missions, each one able to land 1.5 tons of science and technology on the moon throughout the 2030s. And yes, I would like one of those payloads to be a space resources pilot plant of some sort. So my colleagues will talk more about the detail of our exploration, our space resources activities. But we know that exploration delivers tremendous value, economic and social benefits. And so the development of space resources is undoubtedly going to be one of the next ones. But here's where I do what I did back in 2019 and see whether it works here again. My question is, do you want this future? Do you want this all to happen? The reality today is that Europe's governmental investment in space exploration is just 7% of that from the United States. So today, the budget there, exploration, is about $12 billion, call it 10 billion euros. We're investing 700 million euros right now in Europe. The challenge, the Director General you have heard, and he's publicly called me out today, is the challenge is to increase it to 10% of NASA. That's a really huge objective, to get to 10% of NASA's budget. So can I conclude, as I did last time, before I run a video, with a little bit of audience participation? Could you all stand up, please? I'm glad I could do this now because the minister has left. So if you're living and working in Europe, please stay standing up. So if you're from abroad, another continent, you're welcome to sit down, fine. If you would like to see ESA invest in space exploration, stay standing up. Great. Phew. If you would like to see ESA invest in space resources, stay standing up. And I'd be really shocked if anybody sat down at this point. So everybody online, everybody's still standing in the room. If you know who the minister is who represents your country at the European Space Agency, please stay standing up. Now, of course, there are lots of people from Luxembourg, so they've just met their minister, so that's no problem. But quite a few have sat down now. So have you written to that minister to support investment in space exploration? Stay standing up. So well done to those of you who are still standing or have the job to actually ask for the money, but you get my point. This is a team effort, exploration, space, everything we do in space is a team effort. But if I think, please, yes, take your seats. If you would like to continue to work together on this vision, imagine the future that lies ahead. So let me help you with this by showing you a short video that takes us literally from last week with Samantha's launch to the space station to the vision of boots on Mars in a few years' time. Please run the video. Thank you very much for your attention and have a great Space Resources Week.
Thank you so much there, and it's always wonderful to get people on their feet. It kind of re-energizes us all. Our next speaker is Robert Cabana, who's the Associate Administrator at NASA. So please welcome him to the stage, a NASA astronaut and a veteran of 4 space shuttle flights. I can't see him.
Hopefully you can all hear me and see me remotely. First off, thank you very much and good afternoon. And David, that was an outstanding video. We have an amazing future in front of us. I would like to thank Minister Fayot and ESA Director General Dr. Aschbacher for working with the Luxembourg Space Agency and the European Space Resources Innovation Center, ESRIC, to organize this important event, and for inviting me to share a few words about NASA and our views on the importance of space resource utilization in the context of NASA's Artemis program. It goes without saying that Luxembourg has demonstrated incredible leadership on the topic of space resource utilization, or SRU. These annual Space Resource Week events have played, and I hope they will continue to play, an important role in facilitating the exchange of perspectives and advancing important ideas on the topic that in many ways is central to our ability to advance our space exploration goals. I'm grateful to Luxembourg for its leadership and vision as one of the 8 original founding members and signatories of the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords, for those who are less familiar, are a set of principles grounded in the Outer Space Treaty to create a safe and transparent environment which facilitates exploration, science, and commercial activities for all of humanity to enjoy. One of the important principles set forth in the Artemis Accords addresses the topic of space resource utilization. Simply stated, space resources will be essential for NASA's Artemis missions to the moon and for future space exploration. The ability to extract and use extraterrestrial resources will ensure that Artemis operations can be conducted safely and sustainably in supporting human lunar exploration. The Accords affirm that the extraction and utilization of space resources, including on the moon, should be conducted pursuant to the Outer Space Treaty, and that the extraction of space resources does not inherently constitute national appropriation under Article 2 of the treaty. Importantly, the signatories of the Artemis Accords commit to informing the United Nations, as well as the public and the scientific community, of their space resource utilization activities. I'm very pleased to say that in signing the Accords, at least 18 countries so far have ascribed to this view on space resource utilization extraction, along with the other important principles contained in the Accords. Many more nations are preparing to sign the Accords soon. We've also taken a number of steps with industry towards putting space resource utilization into practice. You may have heard us use the phrase, go, land, live, explore, which provides a shorthand for the strategic framework of NASA's approach to our Artemis missions and ISRU. Go, rapid, safe, and efficient space transportation. Land, expanding access to a diverse set of planetary destinations. Live, sustainable living and working further from Earth. And finally, explore, transformative technologies to enable bold new missions. Through that framework, we are coordinating across disciplines to lay out what we think we need and where we are heading in each discipline, while requesting feedback on how to make it more valuable to industry and our partners. An important aspect of all this is to ensure that we have a supportive policy for the recovery and use of space resources to provide a stable and predictable investment environment for commercial space innovators and entrepreneurs. To that end, in December 2020, NASA selected 4 companies to collect space resources and transfer ownership to the agency. One of those 4 companies is Luxembourg's own iSpace Europe, along with Lunar Outpost of Colorado, Maston Space Systems of California, and iSpace Japan of Tokyo. This is a proof of concept effort for a small amount of money, about $25,000. And the effort relies heavily on the success of another innovative NASA program, the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program. The 4 companies for this lunar resources procurement will collect a small amount of lunar regolith and from any location on the moon and provide imagery to NASA of the collection and the collected material, along with data that identifies the collection location. Subsequent to receiving such imagery and data, a transfer of ownership of the regolith to NASA will take place. After ownership transfer, the collected material becomes the sole property of NASA for the agency's use in the Artemis program. Some of the proposed landers are CLPS landers, and this program advances NASA's efforts in lunar resources. By putting our payloads on industry's landers and rovers, both parties are winning by saving money, diversifying transportation capabilities, accelerating the schedule, becoming profitable, and thus advancing space commerce and more. Other advancements like CLPS will continue to grow the roots and soil of this economic sector, providing the capabilities at affordable prices that more advanced activities like ISRU will need. These companies are the advanced scouting parties that will aid NASA in obtaining data we need to successfully plan our human missions. Leveraging commercial involvement as part of Artemis will enhance our ability to return to the moon in a safe, sustainable, innovative, and affordable fashion. To be clear, the challenges are enormous, and they're not all related to technology advancement and research. We have a lot of work to do in the regulatory and policy domain also. And there are important roles for everyone in communicating, advocating, and raising awareness. I want to thank again the government of Luxembourg for its leadership and vision, and for providing this important forum for this meaningful exchange in this innovative domain that will be essential to the next era of exploration at the moon and beyond. I hope that you all have a very successful conference, and thank you again for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to have your presence with us in this hybrid form that we're all so used to nowadays. And I'm sure you'll be able to be accessible online for any questions as well. I just wanted to go back to something that David Parker said about free buses. We also have free music lessons here in Luxembourg now. So perhaps there's something that can happen with this space freeness, just sowing a seed of an idea there. Yeah, Luxembourg is very generous in these ways. That's free music lessons for adults too. Next, we have a video. It's from Hiroshi Yamakawa, who is the director of JAXA.
Hello everyone, I'm Yamakawa Hiroshi, JAXA President. First, I would like to sincerely thank His Excellency Mr. Franz Fayot for inviting me to the opening session of this event. And today, I would like to briefly introduce JAXA's activity in terms of space exploration and space resources. As space exploration activities such as lunar exploration become more diverse than ever before, space resources utilization is also becoming increasingly important. Conclusion of the Memorandum of Understanding between the governments of the Luxembourg and Japan in 2017 to facilitate exchanges on space resources sector is one such example of this trend. The availability of lunar water resources will be the key to the development of full-scale space exploration activities. So the future expansion of lunar surface activities will largely depend on the knowledge gained from the forthcoming lunar exploration, including the availability of lunar water resources. If sufficient amount of available water resources could be found, facilities to utilize the water will be needed. Furthermore, when lunar activities expand further, such as when manned wide area exploration goes into full swing, facilities for lodging and storage, power supply systems, and systems for using local materials and reusing resources brought from the Earth may be required. As the number of permanent residents on the Moon increases, it is expected that food production systems and other systems will also be required. Accordingly, JAXA believes that it is necessary to appropriately develop the infrastructure to support such future lunar exploration activities in line with the different development phases of lunar surface activities. As we envision such a future, it is important to ensure that we develop technologies for sustainable exploration activities. As the first step for lunar surface exploration, JAXA is conducting the Lunar Polar Exploration Mission, LUPEX, jointly with India's ISRU to land an unmanned rover and other vehicles in the lunar polar region in 2024 to investigate the existence and location of water resources. ESA has agreed to provide observation equipment for this project, and NASA is expected to provide a payload. Along with this, JAXA is progressing diverse research projects related to in-situ resource utilization since 2016, such as development of equipments for low-cost separation, concentration, storage, and utilization of low-concentration carbon dioxide, and development of compact and portable soil moisture sensor. These are the joint activities carried out with companies, universities, and research institutes. I also would like to underline the business collaboration between Japan and Luxembourg. iSpace is a Japanese startup tackling space resources utilization, based also in Luxembourg, is one such example. And we hope more and more business collaboration will be developed between our two countries. In 2020, the Japanese government has decided to participate in the US-led Artemis program. In the future, JAXA plans to contribute to this program by providing life support systems to the Gateway, a manned space station orbiting the Moon, and by transporting supplies to the Gateway station by the new H2 transfer vehicle, HTVX. Also, at the end of last year, Prime Minister Kishida expressed his intention to realize the landing of a Japanese astronaut on the Moon in the late 2020s. To contribute to the lunar mission, JAXA is currently conducting research and development of a manned pressurized rover. Lastly, I would also like to touch upon the importance of ensuring transparency. Currently, many countries are pursuing various lunar exploration projects. JAXA hopes that many countries will participate in international space exploration and contribute in their respective fields of expertise, thereby advancing lunar exploration and human development. As many countries promote space exploration, including lunar exploration, it is important for these countries to share a set of principles for creating a safe and transparent environment. And we believe that this will be the cornerstone for internationally coordinated space exploration activities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, we're delighted now to welcome a fellow female to the stage, Kathryn Hadler, who has been the first director of ESRIC since April 2022, which frees up Matthias Link a little bit to move back to many other jobs. So, Kathryn, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Hopefully I've got some slides. There we go. Perfect. Yes, thanks, Lisa. And to everybody in the room, welcome to beautiful Luxembourg, my new home. And for those of you online, we hope that you will be able to join us in future editions of Space Resources Week. I have been the director of ESRIC for 1 month. ESRIC is the European Space Resources Innovation Centre, and in the next few slides, I will give you a brief tour of some of the activities that we have at the moment. So firstly, let's talk about what is ESRIC. And you've heard about this already from Minister Fayot and our other esteemed guests. ESRIC was started as an innovation centre, and it was brought about by a partnership between the Luxembourg Space Agency and Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. It exists as both an innovation centre and a department at LIST. A bit later on in 2020, ESA joined as a strategic partner, and that partnership is really very important to us. The vision for ESRIC is that it will become an internationally recognised centre of expertise for scientific, technical, business and economic aspects related to space resources. and that's both for exploration and for a future in-space economy. And when we look at space resource use, or ISRU, we can see that those systems are incredibly complex. So the diagram that you see on the right is a simplified version of the gap assessment report from the ISECG that was released a year or so ago. The original diagram is fabulously complex. This is a much simplified version. Some of the linkages are missing, but what we can really see from this diagram are all the different components that make up an ISRU system. We can also see from here the interconnectedness of these systems. We need feedstock production, manufacturing, construction, consumables production, and so on. So when we think about ISRU and space resources, this is not just about accessing and exploiting resources in space. It's fundamentally about resource use, and it's about resource extraction and use in a resource-scarce, hostile and pristine environment. And that point is really important, and I'll come back to it later on. One of the great things about this, as we have already heard, is that it will produce both produce and enable scientific discovery and also economic activity. But what we really see from this diagram, and what we will see from the next 2.5 days, is that this is a significant challenge. It is too big a challenge to be achieved by one space agency or organization or business or research institute on its own. It really requires a community effort, and that we will see in more detail. So what does ESRIC actually do? Last year when we were online, you would have heard Matthias Link, our interim director, talk about what ESRIC will do. And now this year I have the great pleasure to be able to tell you about what ESRIC is doing. So ESRIC is developing activities in 4 areas that will support the European space resources community in the first instance, but broader as well. We have 4 pillars. They are research, business, knowledge, and community, and now we will take a little tour through each of those activities. So let's start with our community activities, and you are at one of our major community activities. So Space Resources Week is organised by ESRIC, but also with LSA, ESA, and LIST. It is the largest event worldwide that is fully dedicated to space resources, and that's in part due to the fantastic organisation that goes in, but also it's testament to the immense amount of interest there is in space resources, and this is something that we really need to harness. We will cover in the next 2.5 days a whole range of topics from scientific, technical, business, legal, and economic. But we have another activity in the community space at the moment, and that is the ESA ESRIC Challenge. This was launched last year at Space Resources Week. It was an open challenge for teams to test their prospecting technologies. The first round was held in November at ESTEC in the Netherlands, from which 5 teams have progressed, and they are progressing into the final, which will be held in Luxembourg on the 7th to the 9th of September this year. I have seen the plans for the final of this. It will be an impressive event. You can find out more about that on Thursday afternoon. Franziska Zanig is talking about the activities in that challenge. In terms of knowledge management, we have a new knowledge management platform that's being launched this week. It's a work in progress. There is a demonstration available this week. And really, this is in response to a survey that occurred last year, where there's a real demand to bring together the vast array, the vast range of knowledge that exists in space resources for everybody to use, and for everybody to use freely. And that's exactly what the knowledge management platform exists to do. There is a demonstration of the knowledge management platform in the exhibition area. I would recommend you go and see it. There's a tangible table that you can go and explore with the team there. It is genuinely very impressive. You can also hear more about that on Thursday morning with Emmanuel Scollon and his collaborators within LIST in the ITIS department. In terms of business support, we have the Startup Support Programme. So the Startup Support Programme is a partnership with ESA, with implementation support from Technoport, which is a technology business incubator based in Luxembourg. The first call closed recently, from which 5 companies were selected, and those five companies are in the 3-month pre-incubation phase. At the moment, they're about 1 month in to that phase. From those 5 companies, one of those will progress into a full 2-year incubation, where they will be supported through their business development. And again, you can hear more about that tomorrow morning, first thing tomorrow morning, with Larry. But I'd also like to talk about the research. Our research activity in ESRIC is growing. Now, research, as we know, takes some time to establish. And we have research activity, and we are growing rapidly. We are building research capability across the value chain. So again, returning to the ISEC diagram, those boxes in red are broadly where we have activity at the moment, but we're not limited, certainly, to those activities. We're focusing on novel technologies, development of existing technologies, but also integrated systems. We're building infrastructure. We have laboratories in place, and we've also received the first of our ESA procured experimental platforms. That's the Alchemist, the hydrogen reduction equipment. In turn, this year we will also receive FFC molten salt electrolysis cells, and into the future, probably towards early 2024, the dirty thermal vacuum chamber. Now, those experimental platforms that are procured by ESA will, of course, in due course, be open to European academia and industry. And I think that's a really important point, that we maximise the use of the infrastructure that we have in order to really see progression. And here's some of our current research programmes, and they are broadly grouped here into 3 topics. We're looking at producing and using oxygen on the lunar surface. We're looking at producing and using metals on the lunar surface, and processes for lunar infrastructure. We're working in collaboration with our partners in LIST in the materials department. They have world-leading expertise in areas such as plasma-enhanced technology, and we are really collaborating with them to look for new concepts and novel ideas. So, for example, plasma-enhanced hydrogen reduction is a product of the collaboration with the materials department, in addition to additive manufacturing and energy storage and production. With Air Liquide, we have a project that will start soon looking at oxygen purification, and with Airbus, we have a project starting in June looking at metal 3D printing. We also have a project that is imminent with Mana Electric, that is funded through the ESA OSIP system on microwave sintering of regolith. So we can see this is our current activity, and it broadly falls into those unit processes we saw on the diagram. But we need to think more broadly around this. We also need to think about the systems, at the systems level. And that's exactly the topic of the major new research programme that was, funding for which was granted at the end of January and through the national research funding body in Luxembourg, the FNR. So the FNR Pearl funding will support the development of a new research group. That research group will comprise 4 PhD students and up to 8 postdoctoral researchers over a period of 5 years. And the topic for this is on sustainability and responsibility in our use of space resources. So topics that we're looking at include enabling technologies, those technologies that are not process-specific, things like interfaces between processes, and also beneficiation, which is my favourite topic. So we will be looking at those subjects. We're thinking about the systems, about integration and optimization around these complex processes. But also bringing in this concept of circularity and sustainability. I come from the terrestrial mining sector, and I'm very aware of the legacy that we have on Earth from our resource extraction history. And I think we really need to address some of those issues by starting with a system that is fundamentally based on circularity and sustainability and minimization of environmental legacy. And so through this funding, through this research program, the solutions for the sustainable and responsible use of space resources. That's exactly what we will do in ESRIC. And this theme of sustainability and responsibility, we've heard about it already this afternoon, but we spent a lot of time in the sector talking about how we will implement space resource utilisation. What we don't often consider is what happens at the end. I said at the beginning that the ISRU was fundamentally about resource use in a pristine environment. We as a community have a real opportunity. We have a real opportunity to demonstrate how we can use space resources in a way that avoids some of the problems, some of the legacy issues that we have on Earth, and in ways that minimize environmental impact and legacy. And so with that, the theme, as you will see for the next 2.5 days, is sustainability. Sustainability in terms of economic, financial sustainability, but also in terms of environmental impact. We've got a packed programme, as has already been mentioned. There are 25 posters out there. I would encourage you to go and have a look at those posters in person, or you can also view them online. I believe a lot of work goes into the posters, so please do make sure that you make the time to go and look at them. We've got over 1,000 people registered and 100 speakers from all over the world. Plenty of opportunities for networking. For those of you in the room, it's great to see everybody face to face. For those online, the conversation can exist in the chat as it did last year. We have an opportunity here to learn from each other, and we can create between us in our community a new vision for our resource needs in space. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and enjoy the rest of Space Resources Week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. I have a little bit of housekeeping rules as well for our wonderful speakers. We can all hear you in the room, but unless you're really talking into these microphones, unfortunately, the red light there at the back, which is the camera for everybody watching us online, they can't hear you so well. So if you're a speaker and want to use this microphone, please use the output in front of you for your slides. I know the reaction is to want, and not everybody could pick up your wonderful slides, but they will, Kathryn's slides will all be available afterwards online, so you can follow up there. And of course, you know exactly where to find her, and she's looking for those PhD students and much more besides. So for our next speaker, you either use a head mic or you look there, and I'm on good authority from all of the tech team that the sound for those people watching online needs to be as good as the sound that we have here in the room. So to welcome our next guest, it's Melchiorre Conti, who is Space Resources Engineer at ESA, and he's going to give us the ESA Space Resources Initiative an overview. Thank
you. Okay. Hello. My name is Melchiorre Conti. I am Space Resource Engineer at ESA, and I will give you an overview of the ESA Space Resource Initiative. Of course, some of the topics have already been discussed by the Director of Human and Robotic Exploration, and Kathryn, and the Minister. So this ESA Space Resource Initiative starts in 2019 with the launch of the Space Resource Strategy that by now everyone should know because it's been discussed many times in this fora. And in 2020, we have formed the Space Resource Steering Group, of which I am blessed to be the secretary, which is a multi-directorate organization in which people from HRE, from tech, IPL, TIA, and CIP come together to discuss the way forwards in the ISRU initiative, and of course coordinate the various projects that are part of our program. And the first document that this steering group has produced was the ESA Space Resource Delivery Plan, which identified 3 flagship goals. The first, in prospecting, to advance and prepare for prospecting missions that we have heard from NASA and JAXA. The ISRU pilot plant, which is the plan to deliver and operate a pilot plant for the production of oxygen and metal by mid-2030s. And of course, the commercialization aspect and the application aspect to prepare and develop early technologies that can support and strengthen the ISRU value chain, as well as bring benefits to terrestrial markets. So Looking at the prospecting activities, we have heard some of these. We have payloads for characterization of the distribution and abundance and availability and accessibility of the resources at the lunar polar regions. Of course, here the main aim is to establish whether these resources are just there, are just deposits, or are actually reserves that can be used for a sustainable presence on the moon. And interestingly, in one of these payloads, there will be one small ISRU experiment, which will be extracting water from the solid regolith. The next will be a mission study for a rover mission to explore the polar ice regions and deposits, which is a candidate for the mission in 2030 to be delivered by the European Large Logistic Lander, with a rover that will map and provide geological context for future missions. And of course, in the spirit of community management and community engagement, as Kathryn mentioned, ESA has been working very closely with LSA and ESRIC to fund the challenge, which happens in 2 steps, as mentioned. 5 companies have already been awarded technological development contracts, and the winner of the next leg will be awarded a co-joint fund development contract by ESA and ESRIC. Now, moving on to the pilot plant. The pilot plant, as mentioned before, is not an easy task, and it would take a lot of steps, and these are summarized briefly on this roadmap. I will discuss each individual stream. We have 3 streams. One is the lunar pilot plant itself, which starts with a concurrent design facility study, which is planned for the fall of 2022. And is under consideration to be proposed for 2023-2025, a pilot plant feasibility phase AB1 with associated rover and an end-to-end concept of operation associated with critical technology developments up to TRL5. The other important stream is the ISRU demonstrator payload study, of which you will hear more from David Beans and John Attas, which again has been in the spirit of the strategy of 2019, has used a novel procurement approach, which is challenge-driven. And the idea is to have a payload that is built in 3 years and will be extracting oxygen from regolith and aiming to extract between 50 and 100 grams of oxygen. And you can find more on the website on the slide. The third stream is where ESRIC is very fundamental. We heard from Kathryn talking about the structure. There are the platforms that have been procured by ESA. We are currently procuring 3 state-of-the-art molten salt electrolysis platforms for research and associated gas purification system. We already delivered a hydrogen reduction technology demonstrator, which will be the focus of a co-sponsor research between ESA and ESRIC to furbish it with the plasma to enhance the capabilities of this existing reactor. And we are already very well advanced in the ISRU in the feasibility study of the ISRU dusty thermal vacuum chamber, which will be followed up by the procurement of such a facility based on the study that is being carried out. Of course, the next big item, as discussed, will be the terrestrial pilot plant, where we will be looking, and as many people in the terrestrial industry know, scalability is not a linear exercise, most certainly not something that you can do geometrically. So the terrestrial pilot plant will be one of the fundamental blocks of the roadmap that you've seen in terms of early scalability challenges, the ability to develop operational knowledge for something that will have to be unmanned for a very long period of times, and long-term operation, and of course the risking the space systems. But most of all, and also in the spirit of another pilot plant that is part of the ESA portfolio, which is Melissa, we want this to be a multi-process collaborative platform where technologies can be tested and integrated as we go along. And of course, these will also benefit from the platforms that we are procuring already. Of course, we also have a lot of work ongoing at ESTEC with the internal research carried out by PhDs and research fellows. We have, especially in the person of Beth and Alexander, published a lot of results on the initial trials that have been done, and more work is going on in aiming to lower the temperature of the process, but also look at the content of the metal that is being produced, process monitoring, and of course, various other aspects that you can find in the slide. But this is not all the research related to ISRU, and perhaps less related to the other is the activities that are ongoing to the spaceships. There are 3 spaceships, one in the UK, one in France, and one in Germany, which work on a variety of topics, all related to advance the human and enable the human and robotic exploration. And ISRU is one of the topics. They are a team of highly motivated persons that are driven by innovation, trying to have R&D and application under the same roof. And they have done plenty of work on microwave, from the initial heating and sintering to moving the source outside the confine of the ovens and bring the source close to the surface of the regolith, which was the precursor to a continuous melting process. And these, as alongside the other research topics such as the thermoplastic and regolith composites for producing parts and spare parts, and also other processes for extraction of oxygen from the regolith using plasma. Some of these projects have also turned into technological development activities with a study looking at microwave sintering and heating for additive manufacturing of regolith, as well as potential technologies for cleaning and removal of dust from optical surfaces, and of course, work on sealing mechanisms for high temperature systems such as a pilot plant or the ISRU DM, and in very dusty environments. Having spoke about the technology part, now we go into the applications as one of the main goals. Of course, we have heard about OSIP, the Open Space Innovation Platform. In 2019, a campaign was launched by Advenit Makaya on off-Earth manufacturing, focusing on a variety of topics, but essentially looking at technologies that could, and ideas that could be enabling the in-situ construction, manufacturing, and maintenance of hardware. And of course, it was a quite successful campaign. There were 23 activities funded at different levels of funding, from research co-sponsored to early technology development. And in November last year, there was the symposium bringing together all the information on the projects that have been carried out, and you can find more on the link in the slide. Also in 2021, we had another call for space resource utilization of application scenarios, in which we were looking at ideas and technologies that would use the resources rather than extract the resources. And as you can see, we have had 34 ideas submitted, of which 5 have been selected and some have been mentioned by Kathryn already, looking at in-situ propellants, a catalyst to convert CO2 using Martian regolith as a substrate and eventually as the catalyst itself, an idea to produce structural part in a near-net shape, sintering regolith, the MoonCom project, which is a project to use regolith and waste polymers to make fibers for various uses, and interesting, as Kathryn mentioned, a project to use the powder that is produced via the molten salt electrolysis process to be used in conjunction with the 3D printed replica, which will fly actually on the ISS. And as you can see, there is a wide range of countries presented, which really testifies the interest in Europe and the excellency of Europe in these topics. And as mentioned, there is also the ESRIC startup program. I will not go into many details, as Kathryn already did, but it's in three phases: pre-incubation, incubation, and post-incubation, in which companies will benefit from economical support, but most importantly will also benefit from the knowledge of the agency to develop first their technical proposals and eventually their market and business proposals. And as Kathryn mentioned, 5 of these have already been identified for a 3-month incubation. Now, it's not strictly speaking an application, but it's part and parcel of the ESRIC 4 pillars, the knowledge management. And as Kathryn mentioned, Emmanuel and the group has the booth outside that I invite you to visit. These started, as we said, last year at the previous Space Resources Week with the questionnaire. And through the year, in collaboration with ESRIC and LSA, we have worked to be here with a demonstrator or a prototype for what we hope become the go-to places for resource knowledge, space resources knowledge for the community at large in Europe and not only. And last but not least, community management, the 4th pillar of ESRIC. ESA has worked very hard for the events in 2019, in which we had a 2-day event with 350 participants. Then we had the hybrid event, which brought us 4 days of knowledge and advancement in technology with over 1,000 participants. And today we are here again with, I think it's more than about 1,100 registered participants in hybrid, but also in presence here with a presence that's not been seen for quite a while. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I also would like to thank everyone in the steering group, inside and outside the steering group, that have contributed with material to this presentation. Thank you very much.
It's lovely to see you again in the flesh, like so many of you here. And speaking of which, it's fantastic to have Jerry Sanders with us, who is going to speak next, the lead for In-Situ resource utilization at NASA. And his talk is entitled NASA Envisioned Future Priorities Plan for In-Situ Resource Utilization.
Okay, I will try to speak to the charts and speak forward. Can you bring my first chart up? Because I'm seeing the conclusions. To begin with, thank you. I want to thank the minister. I want to thank Matthias and the organizers for letting me speak here today about a subject very important, NASA's ISRU plans. And as our administrator, Associate Administrator Bob Cabana had said, all of our research that we're doing in the Space Technology Mission Directorate falls under 4 major themes or thrusts: go, land, live, and explore. So ISRU falls into in the land category. And we were directed to think big and to think long term. And so our charts, or my presentation is called the ISRU Envisioned Futures Priorities. So they're pretty dense. If you know me, I typically have very concentrated charts. They will be released to you, but also they are being released through a request for information, because NASA is now reaching out to basically industry, academia, partners, to really engage the audience in the community to find out if we're going in the right direction. So if you look at this first chart, we're thinking big in terms of scalable ISRU production capabilities for sustainable commodities on the lunar and Mars surface. And so there are 3 major themes within that. What do we do with ISRU? The one people think mostly of is the bottom right-hand corner there. commodities for transportation systems, your propellants, whether it's on the lunar surface, Mars surface, or in orbital infrastructure. We start talking about, 1 to tens of metric tons of product to begin with, but we're really envisioning how do we sustain and grow this to hundreds, thousands of metric tons. On the bottom left, as Melchiorre had mentioned, besides propellants, we want to build infrastructure. What are the metals? What are the feedstocks and ceramics and plastics? So again, starting out with small amounts, but ramping up to tens, hundreds, thousands of metric tons of those. And then for sustainable human activities, we're thinking about the commodities for food production and habitat and such. The basic chart, you've seen some different things. We break ISRU into the different areas. First, you have to understand the resources at your destination. You perform assessments, you extract those, and you start to process them, whether it's atmospheric or volatile resources or regolith-based resources. The important point that I think my previous speakers and I will say is that ISRU is not alone in this. It requires multiple technical disciplines to pull off. The other thing is if we're making propellants or commodities, there's got to be a customer. So it's that infrastructure, that ecosystem that needs to occur. ISRU doesn't exist on its own. It has to be part of a bigger picture. This chart just kind of breaks down the 4 major areas that I've talked about. What do we need for resource assessment? What are the subcategories? What do we need when it comes to acquisition and preparation of those resources? How do we turn those resources into some kind of an early mission commodity, whether it's water or oxygen or propellants? And then how do we turn those resources into feedstocks for manufacturing and construction? What you'll see in these charts is those aspects, not necessarily the manufacturing and construction. There are separate roadmaps and envisioned futures for those. However, how do we feed into those activities? And then there's the cross-cutting things, your simulants, your thermal vacuum chambers and such. And as the diagram shows, there's that interplay, not just within ISRU and what happens, but also how does it feed to other functional blocks. And this is a really important chart, again, emphasizing the fact that ISRU doesn't exist on its own. You need power systems, you need transportation systems, you need common nav, you need maintenance, as Kathryn kind of alluded to. Sustainable operations are going to require you to deal with the day in, day out aspects of how do you keep this hardware contained and operating. We'll be dealing with people. So whether they are the ones that are doing the maintenance or we're supporting them, construction and outfitting, we want to grow our infrastructure, and then obviously commodity and storage. And this is a very detailed chart, but we're also starting to show what does ISRU provide products to and what does ISRU need to get some kind of a product or service from. And so again, this ecosystem needs to be built simultaneously as we're bootstrapping all of this work. This chart kind of shows the progression from what are the resources, what do we know about them, to what are some of the initial commodities and products that we might. I've highlighted those in gold. But the long term is we're going to really want to refine those products more and more, getting into raw metals to begin with, but then some higher grade metals, some higher grade ceramics, nutrients, plastics, and such as time goes on. So we got to keep our minds on that food chain or evolution of the products. Our plan is multi-phased to begin with. Build that customer base. Try to understand who the customers are as well as who are the possible suppliers. Work with each other. Build that community from a terrestrial and space industry aspect and partnerships. perform lots of ground development before you ever fly anything. And again, here, engage industry, academia, and the public to lay the foundation for that. But we got to buy down the risk of these technologies. Nobody's going to put large amounts of money into an ISRU plant or buying an ISRU commodity unless you have demonstrated some of the basic feasibilities of those technologies in the operations. So we use, as was mentioned, our Commercial Lunar Payload Services contract, or CLPS, fly some of these demonstrations early, test out the feasibility. Do they operate the way that we want them to? We can use simulants and vacuum chambers on Earth, but they only go so far. So what did we miss by doing it in the actual environment? But then, as was mentioned several times, the idea is build a pilot plant. So what is this pilot plant going to do? It's going to demonstrate end-to-end all the processes that are needed to acquire, process the regolith, and get a commodity or a product in the end. Validate that product, perform those operations over a period of time, say a year, to make sure you understand the maintenance and the reliability aspects, and then maybe hand off that product in the end. That should buy down the risk enough for a company to then start saying, hey, I can make this on a realistic scale, scale it up and such. In the end, ISRU must be demonstrated before it can be used in a mission-critical application. I work for a human spacecraft organization. I know that you have to demonstrate as much as possible before you put something in the critical path of a crew member. This is our top-level plan. I actually have a more detailed chart, but for some reason it's not in this presentation. But it talks about that shifting of where we are on the ground today, some of the early missions in terms of prospecting. We have a few orbital missions. We have LRO in orbit now. We have 2 prospecting missions on the books, Prime 1 and Viper, to start looking at those polar resources. But we don't necessarily think that that's enough. And Clive Neal will talk about what else do we think we're going to need from a water resource prospecting. We heard a little bit about the Japanese mission that might play into that as well. The idea, though, is sometime around 2026, we would like to fly our first demonstration. It could be oxygen extraction from regolith, it could be water processing. When this occurs and which one we pick will be a function of basically a combination of what is our allowable risk and what is our budget. With that, if the technology pans out, then the next step would be, okay, how do I take that to the pilot plant? So these are some of the things that we're doing right now, but again, this envisioned future. So within the Space Technology Mission Directorate, we have a lot of these individual demonstrations that we're considering, not just ISRU demos and pilot plants, but we have our landing accuracy, we have our cryogenic fluid management tests, we have autonomy in rovers, we have our VSAT power generation masts for the poles. How do we start bringing all those individual pieces, plus what ESA and other countries will be providing, and put them into a larger framework? Eventually, for a sustainable outpost, we're going to want those large-scale power generation capabilities, the landing pads infrastructure, the maintenance, whether it's by crew or robots, and these commodities. So we have to take that vision as well, not just ISRU on its own, but this whole infrastructure. We've done a lot of assessments, especially over the last year or two. What is the state of the art? Not just in the United States, but in Europe and elsewhere. And part of the reason why I'm here is to understand that state of the art even more. And in those different areas, I have a few bullets here that you can look at later on. On the right-hand side, there's different projects and hardware that we're developing. But in each one of these categories, we have a number of ongoing tasks. Typically, our technology readiness is on the order of 2 to 4 out of 9 for a fully dedicated system. This is a kind of an eye chart, but it kind of shows those technology areas, some of the projects that we're doing, the time phase of the start and the end. So this kind of helps build us an understanding of what are our current emphasis technologies, what are we missing, what's their start and end TRL, and what do we envision going in the future in a lot of these different areas. This chart, so the last chart shows it from a kind of a start-end date. This goes from the end-to-end perspective. If I'm looking at oxygen extraction from regolith, I got all these different boxes. Some of these projects go multiple functions. So how do we look at those different technologies and make sure that they're lined up with each other, that the requirements that they're working to are similar to others? So how, and by identifying it this way, companies can now start looking for partnerships. Hey, I'm doing these two boxes. I see that company doing this other box. How do we start to partner? And the next charts show pretty much the same thing from a water mining perspective. Here again, the end-to-end process for water mining in the permanently shadowed crater all the way to liquefying and storing hydrogen and oxygen. And from all this work, yeah, we have a tremendous amount of work going on, but there are still a lot of gaps that we need to cover. So in each one of these areas, I put very top-level bullets of mining feasibility or whatever. I have lots more details that I can't go into, obviously, in the time that we have. But we recognize, and we're trying to tell industry and academia and our partners, these are the things that we see we have gaps in. And as Kathryn mentioned, there is so much work here. This is not a single country. This is not a single company that has to pull this off. So from all of this work, we came back and we said, okay, in these particular technology areas or aspects, what are we doing good at? So from a very visual perspective, green means, yeah, we're heading in the right direction. So for oxygen extraction from regolith, we're funding 6 different technologies. We got 9 different projects and 3 different water extraction and electrolysis activities going on. We have a lot of coordination with our excavation and construction groups in terms of, making sure that the excavators meet our expectations and that we're starting to work the feedstocks. However, as you start going down the list, you start seeing some yellow things, for resource assessment. Yeah, we got different mining techniques for mining water in permanently shadowed craters, but not many of those have actually panned out to show feasibility. For example, there's been these concepts of having a dome and beaming energy down the ground and the water magically comes into the dome. None of the technologies that have done work today have really shown that to be very feasible for distances more than a few, maybe 10 centimeters below the surface. And if water's down to a meter, that's not a feasible approach. So we have to keep working in those areas. And then there's the red. These are things that we've completely either missed or haven't had the funding opportunities to really dive into. So for example, a neutron spectrometer can see hydrogen down to about a meter, but looking at L-cross, the water may be down to 3 meters. So how do we get down to those 3 meters if we want to do a prospecting or a resource extraction mission? So that's, for example, considered red. Moving on, flying the resources, we have a lot of good understanding of, we have several missions on the books for both landing and orbital. But hey, I think from the community, we're starting to hear that maybe some more orbital data is worthwhile. And then, as was mentioned by several other speakers, the community aspects. How do we engage the commercial, the academia, the industry? Here, we're doing a lot of good things, just like in Europe, and I won't go into all of those. So our priorities, where are we going right now, our immediate future? So yes, we want to continue to develop our water, oxygen mining paths, see if we can close those technology gaps, especially working with oxygen extraction from highland regolith. During Constellation, we focused on Mare. We're finding that the highland regolith behaves much differently than we expected, and so our processes need to be modified to work those. As well as, until we know more about what the water resources look like in permanently shadowed craters, we're trying a lot of different technologies, assuming that it may be granular ice or as hard as concrete. We need to expand the development of metals extraction and in particular aluminum. So in the past, we focused on propellants. We're now looking at infrastructure. How do we develop the feedstocks going into 3D printers to enable growth in power generation, aluminum wires, and such? We think resource assessment is huge, not just within NASA, but around the community. Again, Clive, Neal will touch on that. We are looking at the long term. So how do we initiate this work with industry and within NASA at the system level? Lots of great technologies, but as I was showing you on those previous charts, none of the programs cover the end-to-end. So how do we start stitching those things together in a logical manner? The government helping to facilitate those partnerships to begin with, turning it over to industry to do those as well. And then basically, as I mentioned, initiate solicitations with industry to progress into these demonstrations, starting with first CLIPS missions, eventually having major investments from industry and commercial for those pilot plants and beyond. And with that, I'll bring my presentation to a close.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And I think you've also given us a test there for our eyesight. I think you need to give us your notes in advance so we can make sure we've read all of the material, and then you can annotate it with your words, because it's, I mean, one slide has so much information. But thank you so much. That's certainly one we'll all have to look back on afterwards. It's our final talk, which is going to be online before the break. And this is Clive Neal from the University of Notre Dame with his talk entitled "The Moon Needs an International Lunar Resources Prospecting Campaign."
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Yes, we can see you too.
Oh, you really don't want to see this. So focus on the slides rather than me. I think that would be the way to go. And let's see. Does this... All right.
Yeah.
So the slides are advancing, or are they not advancing? All right. I have no idea what's going on here, but all right. So the slides are not advancing, even though I'm on the clicker. So I'll keep trying that. Let's try. No, slides aren't advancing. Oh, there we go. There we go. They're advancing there, but not with me. All right. There we go. All right. So my slides will not be as dense as Jerry's, so you can relax there a little bit. And you see that we've changed the name from prospecting to evaluation because of various and sundry things. But listening to the talks today, we talk about lunar resources as if we know everything about them, and Jerry pointed out we do not. There's a lot of literature written by NASA, and Bob Cabana actually mentioned it, that lunar resources are going to be critical for a sustained human presence on the moon, but we don't know if that's possible.
We seem to have lost our wonderful speaker. I'm going to just see if we can get him back and look at our wonderful technical team, because it would be definitely better to see him than me and listen to his talk. We'll give it one more go. Have we got him? Will we get him? You're back again. Hello. Can you speak to us with sound? I can't hear you at all. We can't hear you at all.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Can we start from the beginning, roughly? And also, if you need any help with the slides, I can be your clicker for you, perhaps. I'm not quite sure how it's working.
Yeah, this clicker is just not doing it. So
if you just say next to our technical team,
okay.
they can probably forward a slide on, I think.
All right.
If I can get a nod, I'm sure they can. Yes, they can. You just say forward and they will do the slides.
Okay, it looks like it's working now. So I'm going to talk about the motivation behind this because, in case you didn't hear me, that the idea of lunar resources, we've been talking about it today as if we know everything about them. And in fact, we don't. And so the motivation behind this idea is to look at the resources. And in my mind, I compartmentalize lunar resources into three broad categories: regolith, volatile-bearing pyroclastic deposits, and polar volatiles. And the little diagram on the right there is trying to sort of show, resources versus reserves. And we've been using this term resource when we actually mean reserve. And that is a dangerous thing to do, because in order to understand if we actually have a reserve, we need to know a lot more about these resources. We need to get to the surface. We need to understand exactly what's there. And most importantly, can we extract them? So maybe regolith is a reserve, but until we get an idea of markets and what the products will actually be, what value the products have to customers, we will not know in the classic terms whether or not we actually have reserves. So this work, a couple of references down there, Julie Kleinhens led the LWIMS study, and Carlos Aschbacher. I'm going to try and drag my carcass out of bed really early in the morning to hear Carlos speak tomorrow about the lunar ore reserve standards. I first heard that when I came to Luxembourg in 2019, and this is an exciting way forward. So the International Lunar Resource Evaluation Campaign is more complete, because as you can see from the diagram on the right, the data we get from this evaluation is going to inform multiple stakeholders in terms of science, exploration, and commerce. And this has to be a campaign because it is much, much bigger than any one nation can actually conduct. The budgets just aren't big enough. And you just get a sense of that by looking at the neutron data from the lunar South Pole. And there are many areas to explore. So this has to be a campaign, and making it international is a way to actually do that and go forward together. But where to go on the lunar surface? In terms of polar water ice deposits, we have an idea of where to go. Cannon and Britt 2020 gave us the ice favorability matrix, and you can see the north and south poles there on the right. This is based upon source, capture, retention terms, and whether the area remained a permanently shaded region before and after lunar polar wander. And you can see the two white squares of Cabeus and Shackleton in the South Polar image, where Cabeus shows a high ice favorability index, but Shackleton doesn't, because before lunar polar wander, it wasn't a permanently shaded region. There are also areas outside these deep PSRs where there is a reasonable ice favorability matrix, and it's bringing to light the idea of these micro PSRs that could be important when they're taken together, of holding substantial quantities of volatile deposits, but these need to be explored. So another study by Brown et al. Used 10 orbital data sets to sort of rank the subsurface and surface ice retention potential. And you can see the list on the right there, and on the bottom left, you can see the data sets that we used. So we get an idea from the orbital data of where we need to go. But I highlight the neutron data because this is very coarse, and you can see that in the red rectangle in the box in the bottom left, 10 to 45 kilometers per pixel. So we do have mini RF data to see into the subsurface, but better neutron data would certainly be important. And to understand the actual depth of penetration, as Jerry alluded to, is also very important. So we do have a potential earlier mission. that could be orbital. And David Lawrence has put together a couple of concept studies of how this could be done from orbit, very rapid mission development that would get us less than 10 kilometers per pixel neutron data at both poles with the same fidelity at both poles. Right now, with Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data, it is biased to the South Pole because that's where the lowest orbit is. So we have less fidelity at the North Pole. But is this necessary? It's open to debate, and within the co-authors on this talk, it is being debated. But we have a way forward, so I want to keep your attention till the last slide. What is the way forward in terms of policy? We've heard Bob Cabana talk about that. David Parker also talked about that. And in terms of the Outer Space Treaty, Articles 1 and 3, we see here in Article 1, exploration and investigation of the moon should facilitate, promote, and encourage international cooperation. In Article 2, we see that we have outer space, including the moon, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty by means of use or occupation or by any other means. So what that means is that if we go forward with an international lunar resource evaluation campaign, it's going to be compliant with the Outer Space Treaty. And again, Bob Cabana also alluded to this. So this is an immediate and next critical step that will be needed, that will facilitate a sustained, and if we make the bold proclamation that this is going to be a permanent human presence on the moon, this demonstrates the long-term commitment, and that will hopefully stimulate the commercial entities to get involved. I think this is going to be needed in order to have a development of a viable cislunar economy. And if the creation of it would create new opportunities for university graduates, and I currently teach a course at Notre Dame called Living and Working on the Moon, and it's in quite a popular course with the students. And I would really love to have one of them answer the question when I ask them, what are you going to do after Notre Dame? And they say, I'm going to go work on the moon. I really think that that's within our reach if we understand the potential of the moon's resources by this International Lunar Resource Evaluation Campaign. This would also help develop international cooperation and diplomacy at a time when the world needs something to bring it together. It would also be able to have the inclusion of countries and communities who cannot by themselves undertake space exploration. And again, harking back to the Outer Space Treaty, Article 1, the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit and in the interest of all countries, irrespective of the degree of economic or scientific development, and shall be the province of all mankind. Now, this is important for countries that may not have launch capabilities, but have a great technical background and can develop the instrumentation needed to understand lunar resources. That can be included in this evaluation campaign. So what are the data requirements? And I'm not going to go through this one in detail, but the data sets are outlined there on the left. And then we go forward as to what is needed. But the required fidelity on the right of that table is something that needs to be discussed, and we need to find consensus on that. So work is needed on data requirements, implementing and coordinating such a campaign. Data sharing and transparency is really important, and defining what this evaluation campaign would look like. And it's going to build upon two previous studies, the workshop in 2019 in the US and the Kleinhens et al. LWIM study, as I've already said. But we really need to start right now. So the vision is to obtain consensus on data requirements to evaluate lunar resources, starting with polar volatiles. And again, looking forward to the update from Carlos tomorrow. And again, we have to include data sharing and transparency. We need to identify instruments and mission scenarios that would attain these data. Again, orbital surface missions, small focus missions, Everything needs to be considered in order to fully evaluate and get the data needed to see if these resources could be reserves, and then invite international and commercial participation in a coordinated international lunar resource evaluation campaign. This has to be a campaign because of the different areas that have shown potential. So the way forward, I invite everybody to check out this website. On the 27th of June, there's going to be a virtual workshop, the Lunar Surface Science Workshop, Session 17, defining a coordinated lunar resource evaluation campaign. I was hoping to have the link to submitting an abstract, that I will get that shared as soon as I have it. And the goals of this are to identify the basic information needed, including constraints, ranges required, so on and so forth, identify the measurement types and characteristics, as well as the types of missions that could supply these data, and then identify ways of consolidating, compiling the information into an accessible, usable form. And this is going to be followed on in the fall of 2022 with another virtual session implementing a coordinated lunar resource evaluation campaign. It's all very well to define it, but then how are you going to implement it? And this is where I think we will have a lot of good discussion about how to move forward in the study. And that is my talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for allowing me to speak despite the technical difficulties.
Thank you so much for the lovely speech, and I'm very glad that we did sort the technical difficulties. It never ceases to amaze me that we still have technical difficulties, even though we're all here talking about what we can do in space. Now, I also apologize for the mispronunciation of Notre Dame as the University of Notre Dame. I can see you're being Americanized over there. I can't hear you reply. You're coming back to us? I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear a reply. Can we have him back just for a second? Can we hear you now?
He said, it's Notre Dame is very American, and as you can tell, I'm very American.
I think I read that you became American in 2013 or something like that.
Yes, so. You can still see the scar.
Well, maybe you can come over here and visit our Notre Dame around us here in Europe sometime soon. Thank you so much, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of this conference online. Now, it is time for a break, and I want us all back here promptly at 3:25, if possible, because we have such a packed second part of the schedule, maybe just 5 minutes after that. But before you go anywhere, very, very important, before your coffee, we're going to have a group photo right outside. So outside Lux Expo on the stairs. Please just get yourselves all there in an orderly fashion now for group photo, then coffee, then back here. Thank you.